Okay, are we live? We are live. Good morning, or as I say in the Truman Show, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on which time zone you're in or where you are. You're welcome back to the Friday testing ground. What's going on with my camera? Testing ground where we drink coffee and talk about composing and composition and different ideas. A place where we can kind of explore and think up of new ideas away from the kind of pressures of deadlines and being too specific about, it's kind of a fun place of experimentation and exploration. Well, it is for me anyway. You might, when you're watching this, think very differently. So, first of all, the piano you couldn't hear in my last week's video. I don't know why. So, why is that repeating? That's weird. Anyway, I don't know why that's happening. Oh, I do know why that's happening. We'll jump into the DAW in a minute. See, that's what happens when you get distracted on you. Which leads me nicely onto the segue of the morning, which is intention. So this year I set some rough guidelines for myself. They weren't exactly resolutions, but they were kind of rough guides. And one of those is being more intentional about what I'm doing, where I'm putting my focus, how I'm composing. And intention can mean a lot of things. So, oh my goodness, my autofocus is just really tripping out there today. So let me give you some notes on a couple of things about how I feel about intention. We'll probably discuss this a little bit more over on Substack at 11 o'clock, which is kind of I'm seeing it as like a kind of a continuation of this longer version. So this is kind of more workshop-y, and then the ideas are explored a little bit more over on Substack. That's kind of the main gist of the morning. So we will be jumping into the DAW soon. Wow, my autofocus just does not like how things are going at the moment. So let's look a little bit about intention. And when I talk about intention, these are some of the things that I mean. So firstly, looking at limitation and elimination. So setting creative limits on yourself can make you just focus in on specific areas. Because what I find, the reason I want to be more intentional about my work is that, especially when you're working in a DAW, there's so much access to so many toys that you just want to put all the toys into your track and just, carpet bomb with like loads of ideas. And for me, I tend to get bogged down in that. It happens so much that I won't finish things and I won't move on and I won't expand, and so using limitations as a creative scaffold is really, really helpful for me. And within that limitations, one of the things you can do is elimination. So stripping away, or as Bruce Lee would say, hacking away at the unessential. So really trying to focus in on why is my camera doing this? Really trying to focus in on the essential elements of your piece. Now, I'm just going to set my autofocus there. Can you see me now? Can you see me now? So hacking away at the unessential. And something you can do to help you with this is what they call the rule of thirds. And the rule of thirds in composition is basically speaking, your ear is drawn, it can only really comprehend kind of three elements at one time. So it's drawing attention to, I don't know what is happening with my camera. This is the joys of live streams. Now, okay, stay there, don't move. Okay, so drawing attention to one of three elements. So a great place you can see this happening is in like pop music, punk music, when they have like guitar, bass, drums, and voice. So is the melody shining? Is something rhythmic happening? Where is your ear drawn to? And if in general you're kind of thinking of three main things happening at once, then expand on one of those three layers. And that gives you room for expansion then. But, you know, being really, really specific about what is the important moments within your piece of music. If you want to drill down on this even further, I spoke about this last week, but was being way more conscious of your use of dynamics. So when you're writing a melody, be really, you know, over the top about where your dynamic elements are within the kind of shape of your melody. Yeah, elimination and limitation. Next one you get from the minimalists, it's repetition as meditation. So minimalist music does this a lot, and so does EDM and electronic music. They use these repeating patterns that kind of have a hypnotic effect, this kind of groove-based. So it says here, revealing micro variations that the listener initially missed. So intentional repetition builds a depth that that maybe kind of jumping from one thing to the next doesn't, and it gives you a certain feel. So this is an interesting topic, especially when minimalist music, when you think of in terms of phasing and, you know, some metric modulation within phrases and things like that. So when I jump into the DAW, I can show you this. Yeah, I have something lined up to explore this topic a little bit further. And number 3, what I have, space. Space is a big one. So I think some of the best uses of space in music, and the space between the notes that you play, is in modal jazz. Miles Davis. If you think about Miles Davis's phrasing, particularly in that kind of 50s or the 60s, was it the 50s or the 60s, when he just started into the kind of the modal phase. So he leaves this acres of space between phrases. Chet Baker's another one who's great phrasing, but I think he copied a lot of that from Miles. And I think he got onto that from, if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Ibrahim Ferrer, who is a piano player, and his use of space was immense. So these huge breaks of silence meant that when it is punctuated by melody or a phrase, that phrase seems to really stand out and be really important. And we spend so much time working to grooves and to the grid, that using space and using silence and punctuating that silence is just something I'm really interested in the moment. At the moment, I think of David Bowie's last album, Black Star, had loads of elements where there was just tons of space. Now, you might listen to it and go, there's no space there, but I mean space between the interplay of instruments. So it's almost as if a musician takes their center stage for a couple of minutes, and then something else becomes center stage, and then it's an interplay. And using that space, I think, and that gets really important then when you're thinking about your orchestration. It's like the DAW having a whole orchestra there. Unless you're Stravinsky and you go, let's just throw it all down. But which if you think about it is kind of like a lot of what Stravinsky does is, you know, using repetition as layering, and he'll use a large section of the orchestra as like one layered rhythmic pattern. So even though it's ridiculously complicated, when it comes together, you know, different elements of it will stick their heads out. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense. Maybe it does. And what's next on my list? Process over product. Products. You can tell that I got a little bit of help from AI to get my list together. But gradual processes unfolding. This is where stuff like Terry Riley's in C really come to the fore. So Terry Riley's in C, if you're not familiar with it, is just a page of simple melodic phrases, all in the same key, and it can be played by any amount of musicians, and they play it however they want, dynamically however they want. They can play it as many repeats as they want. They can pretty much do whatever they want. But it's within this kind of small framework. So you jump from one section to the next and it all fits together. So within that, the process of playing it, all these different elements will come out and you'll hear kind of different overall piece every time. So the music being made is a process rather than intentionally composed in that instance. But if we kind of relate that back to intention, the intention is still there behind it because there's still a framework. There's still an intention. I'm reluctant to use the word intentionality because I'm not sure if that is a word. I'm not sure if it's a made up word. So I like the word intention. So if I'm using the word intention wrong, then, you know, you can go on your own live stream and check that out. And the last one is directness without decoration. So this, I am really guilty of this part of the idea of ear candy, the idea of loads of stuff going on in, you know, different parts of the sonic space around your head when you're listening in headphones. I mean, where have you placed, you know, a reverb? Where have you placed a piano or a keyboard or a synth, you know, in the stereo field? What kind of effects have you used? Is your reverb, you know, what kind of EQ have you got on your reverb so when it dies away, it gives you a certain sparkle? These are all nice things to do, but when you focus on them too much, it really takes you out of the overall intention. So these are all guidelines. They're not hard and fast rules, but for me, they help keep me kind of keep me from getting lost in the woods too much with I'm sure you've all been there. You've started a project, it ends up sitting on the DAW for, you know, weeks or months, and you always have it in your head, I'll come back to that later, and we seldom do. And first and foremost, the intention of just arranging something and getting it finished can be enough. So just to recap, I'll be talking about these later on Substack, but I want to jump into the DAW. Elimination, repetition, space, process, and directness. So all pretty good tips, I think, if I do say so myself. Okay, so let me jump into Logic and show you what I've been up to. So here we go. Now, can you all see this? Can you see this and hear this? I'm just going to play something. Okay, and then I'll tell you what I'm doing. So lately I have been really nerding out on minimalist music, because it kind of helps with a lot of these guidelines of intention and, stripping away the unessential and stuff like that. So I'm going to look at some of the minimalist processes. And my keyboard goes crazy whenever there's a phone around, so I haven't turned on. So minimalist processing, or minimalist compositional techniques, or things that minimalist music does. So rhythmic displacement, that's the first one. So here I have, let me talk you through what I did here first. So I played some chords in, and simple enough, 4 chords with G minor. And why are you not playing? Because I haven't you turned on. So hopefully you can hear this. So G minor, D major, yeah. Then we have E flat, E flat dominant, B flat major. So not very typical. You could say it's in G minor, really. Or you could say it's in B flat major. So have a listen. So we've got a G minor, another G minor, D major, E flat. Nice chromaticism there, which I do say so myself. And B flat major. Okay, so fairly straightforward. So then I said I wanted to develop this a little bit, and I was listening to the Radiohead song Weird Fishes, and one of the guitar parts is in groups of 3 and one of the guitar parts is in groups of 5. So I thought, that's an interesting thing, and it kind of comes up on my list of polyrhythms. So minimalist music uses polyrhythms quite a bit. So I'm going to turn off the main chords. So I split it into 2 groups. So one's panned to the left and one's panned to the right. So the triplets, I think, are on the left, and the quintuplet is on, but it's not a typical quintuplet. It's kind of like a what would you call it? It's like a quarter note quintuplet. So it's a real polyrhythm. And to be honest, I was feeling my way around this. So anyone who's an expert on polyrhythms, call me up on where my placement of the quintuplet is, but it sounds something like this. So same chords, just divided up into two different rhythmic structures. Okay, so I've just realized I don't know why it's not showing. Okay. Okay, so sorry, I was monitoring the whole situation there, so I was behind in my stream, so apologies there. But you know, this is a one-man show. I don't have any production assistants. The only production assistant I have is Coffee. Okay, so as you can hear there, we have a triplet version. Really straightforward harmonically, and then we have this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if we put it with the click, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it makes this kind of polyrhythm thing. Now you could take that a step further and move the melody kind of to displace it, if you wanted to do that, and then just to kind of give a sense of rhythm to, instead of kind of the pulse of the click, I just added in an extra bass. So that I might change around later on, but that's kind of the starting point. That's roughly where we're going with it. So if we take the first thing we can do here, rhythmic displacement. So what we can do with the rhythmic displacement, and this is really, really easy, is copy and paste. So the triplet, this is going to be an extra bar, I think. The triplet, instead of starting on beat 1, you just move it to the and of 1. And what you'll find is the interaction between one layer of the rhythm starts to interact in a different way with the so the triplets will interact in a different way with the quintuplet. Okay, that's a very kind of long and boring answer there. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to move these all over by half a beat. And then if I copy and paste over the groups of 5. So again, I'm trying to be not overthinking about production yet. This is purely compositional. So that's the main drive behind this at the moment, is composition. It's not production. So copy and paste and all this stuff, that's okay for now. Because when it starts to do something interesting, and you know where you're going with the piece, then you know, then you might start to look at doing sessions for production, etc. So instead of playing the whole thing, let's just hear how this starts to change and interact in a different way, just simply by displacing the triplet from starting on beat 1 to the and of 1. So it kind of gives a cool layering effect, which I quite like. So the next thing on my list here is now, see, so this last little triplet just kind of peeking out there because everything's been displaced over by a little bit. Now, another thing we can do really easily is this idea of abrupt tonal change. So an abrupt tonal change will be to just modulate the key. So everything stays the same, except we might bring everything down a semitone. And see how that feels. This idea is kind of John Adams' Phrygian Gates kind of idea, where you just literally change key without any kind of modulation into the key. So it just changes. And John Williams does this a lot too, where he'll just start in a key and dump into a second key. No problem. And, you know, technically speaking, you should lead yourself up into changing a key. But, you know, sometimes you don't even have to. You just change. Now, this, again, it depends on your taste then. Like, does this work? Is this something that will work for you? So we're going to take everything and move it down. Move it down one semitone. Okay, so again we have our rhythmic displaced triplet. That's all down a semitone, and this is all down a semitone. So this will either work or it won't. So let's have a listen. Which is pretty cool. That's down in semitone. Let's actually just go down a tone, because I think that might be a bit cooler. So if you want to know how I got that pulsing bass line, whoopsie daisies. Yeah, that pulsing bass line comes from adding an arpeggiator to a single note and just setting it to 8 notes. We could do it at 16 notes either, if you're feeling it, which makes a really good, you know, again, if you wanted to do that, you could set it at 8ths, and then when you wanted to increase the intensity, you could just set it to 16ths. So we're still back in the original key, G minor, and now we'll go to F minor, really. So slightly smoother transition. Makes sound like and repetition is really good and hypnotic, but just be very, very careful when you're using repetition in these patterns, that ideally they start to evolve and develop over time. So rhythmic displacement's one way of doing it. Layering is another way of doing it. So, you know, so we've done rhythmic displacement, we've done an abrupt tonal change. We're going to add a layer on the next grouping. So we can change the key as well if we want, but what I really want to try out with this layering is this kind of Max Richter idea, where I was watching Implied Music. If you haven't seen Implied Music, it's a YouTube channel. Really, really good. By the way, if anybody's watching and you want to leave a comment, please do comment. Especially if there's something you can't hear, because last week couldn't hear the piano for some reason. So I hope you're all hearing all of this and it's giving you something. So yeah, Max Richter for his Hamnet score had a really straightforward chord progression. Same chord progression as I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor, by the way. But his placement of the strings, straight away, the kind of typical reaction is to go, let's do some soaring strings, because high strings equal high energy and drama. That's kind of, rule number one of composing and film composing in general. But what was unusual was Max Richter decided, no, he's just going to sit in strings right in the middle of the harmony. So I thought that was really, really an interesting choice. So just in the interest of symmetry, I'm going to keep the F, and then I'm going to go back up to E flat. Or sorry, up to G minor, really, for here. Now, why is it starting on an unusual beat? Oh no, it's starting on a bar. That's cool. And very simply, I'm going to add in just a really straightforward string library. The Crow Hill Company do great free sample libraries, and they have one called Pocket Strings. Now this one isn't free, but I think they was on sale for like €10, which is amazing. I just need to set up a channel and make it sound amazing. So you can get it sounding more synthy or more traditional. Now, I am looking for really, really, really simple. So we know that the first chord is G minor. So I'm looking in and around here. And maybe 2 notes. And they can be within the harmony if you want. But maybe something that's just outside the harmony, but not crazy dissonant. So maybe a 9th or a 6th. So that'd be like an E or a D. A C or an E. So that might be nice. Then the 6th will remain as the 2nd of the D major, and then we can go up to F sharp or G flat, I guess, and then yeah, let's mess around with that a little bit. So strings. Okay, and I'm going to need the click. So if the click is a bit, horrible, apologies. So again, feel free to jump in the chat here. If there's anything, that you'd like to contribute, that'd be great. Well, that click is really loud. To that. So the strings are sounding very full on there. Much more aggressive than I wanted them to sound. So let's just chill them out a bit. There we go. So we want something a little bit less intense. So, okay. What did we say? There was the 9th and the 6th. And then for the D major, maybe the major 7. And we might just move the B. Okay. But anyway, I don't want a whole lot of movement in the strings. I want them sitting right in the middle, harmonically speaking. And that's their kind of job, is to just sit there, hang out. Okay, interesting. So sometimes what I like to do is eliminate some of the complexity so I can hear how the harmony is actually working together. And yeah, just checking the time here. So 3 people jumped on. That's fantastic. So let's have a listen with the bass just to see how it's sitting together. All right. Actually, I'll fix that. And here. Now, what has happened here? Okay, so I've managed to move everything to a different key. And yeah, D flat. Okay, so these all jumped when I moved. So easy solution to this is I can just bring these down a semitone. So that's why it was sounding so strange there. Okay, not really liking that major 7 for the D. So let's try U. So we'll bring it to a 6. And then it resolves. Yeah, so that's nicely resolving. So not ideal, you know, maybe a little bit too busy, or like it's giving a bit too much harmonic information that I might get rid of some of it. But just as a kind of a concept, the intention there was, what I wanted to do was have these come in as a layer rather than kind of too much harmonic or melodic information. So you're going from this Okay, so there's something going weird there. That I don't really. It was when I was copy and pasting something, I moved something where it shouldn't have been. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. We can fix that easily enough later on. So, what I wanted to look at just lastly in my kind of intentional composition. So you see how this starts to come together. You're taking kind of a little bit of harmonic information and you're kind of applying all these things to it. And within that, you start to kind of build out this kind of really interesting process, which is, it's maybe less based on what your ear is telling you, and it's more a kind of a sense of discovery, which I'm really into. I dig that. So the last thing I'm going to touch on, because melodic exploration is just too much of a big deal, really, isn't it? You know what I mean? So the last thing I want to touch on is timbral texturing. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to crossfade from this idea being on a piano to a different timbre, a different type of instrument. So what I find really, really great for this is when piano kind of merges into synthesizers or synth sounds. So let's do, I want to be quick now, but obviously, spend time, know what synthesizers you want to use and all the rest of it. So, okay. So let's just have a listen. Whoops. How did that happen? So, okay, not overly gone on that synth sound. We want something a little bit mellower. So I don't want to spend loads of time messing around with synths, because I do find that is painful to watch and go through. So I will spare you. So we can change key. Okay, so the idea here is one goes down and it kind of evolves into a synth. So you kind of have this rough idea. So when we have the piano, any minute now. So here it comes. So it kind of blends timbrally. Now this can expand over time. I'm only doing it over one chord change, but what you could do is have this evolve over a whole kind of section, and which will make it feel a bit more natural. And again, if we do this idea here with the quintuplet, and take this down kind of over the last bar and take this up over the last and then this needs to be the DU audio. So we're going to take that and drop it there. So hopefully this will now sound like the piano's turning into a synthesizer. Alright, so I'm just going to do this now. Hang on a second. Back to my talking head. Okay, I hope I'm still streaming now, but I assume I am. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Right. YouTube's having a bit of a moment here. I'm hoping it's just on the playback, but maybe it's on the whole stream. But to be fair, if you have made it to the end of this stream, then, you know, kudos to you. You're an amazing, amazing person. And yeah, I hope you got something out of this. This is kind of, you know, stick it on the background and put it at double speed if you need to. And hopefully there are a few elements on this that you can apply to your own compositions. But, you know, I think within your week, always try and have a little session where you just explore some ideas. And, you know, it's like your little notebook. For me, I'm enjoying doing this in public, like public facing, because hopefully some of these ideas are interesting and you can apply them to your own work, and it helps you out a little bit. That's the goal. So that's it for Coffee and Composing this week. Thank you very much for coming and stopping by. There's a couple of links in there if you're looking for an orchestral template, or if you're a Logic Pro user, or if you would like to join the Substack newsletter, there's a link in there as well. That comes out every Friday. And speaking of Substack, I'll be jumping over there at 11 o'clock, which is in 10 minutes time from now. And I will be talking more about intention and using intention ideas for your composing and all the rest of it. So yeah, love to see you there. If you want to join the conversation, you know, stick up a comment on the chat and let me know how you get on with this. Yeah, and see you on the next